Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Conversations. My name is Einav Avni. I am an alignment coach and energy healer. And this podcast, Healing Conversation, is all about natural healing for anything that is physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So, let me introduce to you today's guest, Carla Wainwright. Carla, it's wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. So, let's get on the same page with everyone. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. I was originally trained as a wildlife biologist, and I worked in that field for many, many years. I felt at the time it kind of merged my love of nature and also science, of course. I've always been, completely fascinated by systems of life. I really felt like something was missing. I kind of reached a bit of a turning point because of some personal challenges, including trauma. And that really began to draw me into the healing arts. And even though I had this scientific training, I started to realize that there was so much more than, conventional science had taught me about the world and my body and energy and all of these different things. And so I actually had a very profound experience with homeopathy, um, which completely blew my mind. I thought, I don't know, understand how I took these two little pellets and I had a massive healing reaction. It completely opened the door to my life in so many ways. I felt like that was a real gift and started to challenge some of the scientific principles and paradigms that I had, really fixated on. And then I began to study homeopathy because I was so intrigued by that. And then I was doing yoga at the same time, and I just became more and more disenchanted with sort of the mainstream um, scientific life that I had. And so I ended up actually just letting that go entirely and really focusing on systems of natural healing, including homeopathy and yoga and somatic healing, and really connecting with the energy of the divine feminine. And so worked in that realm for many, many years, and um, started to also become really interested in sexual energy as a really potent healer, especially for women because it's been so repressed, of course, in our lineage and in our society. So I did a lot of training around that, and really loved that work. And then fast forward to the past several years where, in my own journey of perimenopause and menopause, I started to realize I needed to pull back some of the science in there. And I really started to merge what I call sacred metabolism. Pulling together science and the esoteric together as this really powerful healing combination. So, in some ways, I feel like I've gone full circle, and that's really where I am today.
Amazing, amazing. I think it's quite interesting, like you say, that, it was very much science-based and everything that was kind of known, right? Factual, what we already researched, and then realizing that actually there is a whole world there that is, it just happens, right? We don't necessarily know how exactly, but it has the power that we were not aware of before, and how wonderful it is to really allow what comes to just come and be there without necessarily labeling it and I guess I'm saying that because sometimes if it's not science, then it's not right to some of us, at least in some point. But then you say, finding all of these different energies and feminine energy, which I think will be very interesting to explore together today. But now, if we already starting at where we are today, so sacred metabolism, what is that combination that you have with, science and esoteric healing?
Yeah. Metabolism really at its core is about how our bodies create and use energy. And so, of course, the conventional system would say that's, like food comes in, it's about hormones and blood sugar and mitochondria and all that, and all of that is true. But we also know that our bodies are engaged in creating energy that, as we just mentioned, like is beyond what we can see and quantify in the physical or scientific realm. So if you add this sacred lens, metabolism is just so much more than a biochemical process. It becomes the way that we really transform life itself into vitality, into pleasure, into creative power. But we need both, right? Because we are human beings living in this human physical body. which we need to take care of. And certainly, as I get older, I recognize, more and more so that taking care of this temple is so, so important. But we can't do one or the other. They actually do need to come together. We need to take care of ourselves in terms of making good lifestyle choices and really honoring this physical body. And we need to tap into, the really uh, expansive, unlimited energy potential that is, all around us within the earth, within nature, within the connections to each other, and really using that energy also as a form of fuel, of energy, of capacity in our lives. So that's what I call sacred metabolism, is bringing in the physical piece, the biochemical processes, of course, but also the esoteric, the energetic, the whether you call that the divine, universal, whatever that is. And both of those pieces are so, so important to really being thriving and vibrant in our bodies.
And how do we start to understand this idea that energy is all around us? Of course, we are energy, and we kind of, slowly connect with this idea more and more. But how do we tap into all of this energy that is all around us, and knowing how to use it for our benefits and for optimal health and vitality?
So this, it is in some ways going back to the basics, which is sometimes the most difficult. So I think
Mm.
that every human absolutely has the capacity to feel energy and to access energy and to build it within ourselves. But we've lost that capacity in our modern living. Many of us aren't taught. Many of us feel really separated from our bodies. People often talk about being sort of a head on a disembodied lower part of this physical form. So, in some ways, it's just really coming back to the most basic. So sometimes that is just slowing down and connecting with your breath and allowing yourself to just notice what's happening in the inner landscape of your being. Um, that seems incredibly simple, but that in itself can be a radical act of just dropping in and being aware of a state of being that normally we bypass because we don't give ourselves the time, or it might feel uncomfortable or just unfamiliar. So, how do we do that? As I said, it can be as simple as just creating more spaciousness for pausing and feeling and noticing. We certainly can use nature. I mean, I think nature is the most powerful healer that we have, of just connecting with nature. And again, just being in that place of mindfulness and spaciousness. So, one of my favorite practices um, is just standing barefoot on the earth and doing that regularly. So, I say I have seasoned feet because I walk in the forest almost every day when we don't have snow, of course, um, in bare feet. So that took a bit of practice, but certainly everybody can stand barefoot on the grass,
Mm.
and just that, allowing yourself to feel that. And perhaps you may not sense so much, but that in itself is starting to begin that powerful exchange of energy and opening up the channels of your body that have really a sacred memory within them of how to do this. Like your body knows, it's just your mind that perhaps has forgotten.
To me, this is something that I find myself keep kind of going back to that place where, we all have this busy life, and a lot of the time we really in that mindset of not, I don't have the time, I don't have the capacity, I don't have the, mindset, all of these kind of, I guess, excuses that we tell ourselves. And yet on the other side, we have people like yourself that really have seen the benefit and know how important it is to really start, we're not saying, from 0 to 100, but really to start creating these daily practices of connecting with nature, connecting with this energy, connecting with something other than this bubble that we find ourselves. And there is actually also a constant source of stress. So what are, how do you help people to kind of start this transitioning in whichever percentage of the day that they might have? But how does that kind of, what is the conversation that is kind of happening?
Yeah, so I certainly, like any practice or habit needs repetition, right? So we certainly, if we were going to train for a marathon, we wouldn't go out running once for 15 minutes and think that we would be able to do the marathon, right? So we need repetition. The body needs the nervous system needs to develop a sense of safety and familiarity, and that is going to happen with repetition. So I always recommend creating practices. What I think can be really beautiful is to bookend your day. So, how can you start your day with intention and connection to, the vital life force energy, sometimes referred to as like the Shakti energy within you. This is the energy of the feminine. It's the energy of creation, of creative power. It's like, how can we do that? And so, one practice that I invite people I work with to do is a shaking practice. And it's really profound. And so, feet on the earth, it doesn't have to be outside. So, of course, it could be inside. And just with your feet grounded and just beginning to shake the body. And you can start off really lightly and then it can become more vigorous. And that in itself is such a powerful practice because it creates movement, of course. The blood is flowing, your lymph is flowing, but energetically, you're beginning to shake things up. And one of the other pieces that I really love about that practice is it begins to put cracks in that emotional armoring that we have on our bodies, right? So the shaking can just be really profound. And what people find, even if they're not used to doing any kind of energy work, is that once they begin to slow things down and they pause, their bodies feel so alive and vibrant in ways that for many people is very unfamiliar, but feels incredibly powerful. So that is a beautiful practice in the morning that I invite people to do. And then the key always is to pause and notice, right? Is to not bypass the magic that happens in the pausing and noticing. It's in those little moments, those gaps that we really, it's like your nervous system takes that in, but your conscious mind also takes that in. And that becomes like a learning, like a really an important anchor. And then conversely, at the end of the day, having some kind of practice to bookend your day. I love giving an elemental practice, connecting people to nature. It's like, what did each of the elements provide for me today? Whether it was earth, air, water, the energy of fire, or maybe it is just simply dropping in before sleeping and scanning through the body and just noticing what's alive, noticing what's speaking, and starting to create that conversation at a somatic level. It's like, what is the wisdom of my body telling me? Because this is your internal energy system. This is the wisdom of your body coming through. And again, we need to spend time giving ourselves space to hear that wisdom. So these are two, very simple practices. They only take a couple minutes on either end, but they really can open somebody's perception into this incredible world um, of energy and deep feeling and wisdom of the body that for many of us is missing.
I love that. And I was just wondering about the pause that you're mentioning, because I recently had a conversation with someone. It's basically in the pause, what basically she was reporting is that there was a lot of space for all the negative conversation to come through. And with this specific person, she was, she was under a lot of influence of a lot of different symptoms, chronic symptoms and pain and discomfort and all of that. And so even if we had that conversation about calming down the nervous system and finding that place of trust and some of the things that you were saying in maybe some different ways, um, she wasn't able to let go of that really active negative conversations and noticing the pain and noticing the fears and noticing all of that. How do we help people like that? And of course, there's so many out there, to start really notice the pause and quieten this active
Yeah.
negative voice.
So I think that, that's just so I want to normalize that. we all we all have those experiences. And part of the reason I think we push away stillness and presence is because it can be really uncomfortable. I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding that, you know, stillness, pausing, meditation, mindfulness is just all bliss and, sparkles and rainbows. It is not. It is not at all. However, this is really where the beauty of the depth of the human experience comes through. And we're all parts, right? We're the parts that are uncomfortable and we're the parts that feel expansive and ecstatic as well. So, in answer to your question, I guess a couple things. So the first piece is I'm really big on titration, so just very small amounts. So certainly, you know, diving head first into like a lot of uncomfortable feelings might just be too overwhelming. And so, if somebody gets into that state of overwhelm, then it's actually not particularly useful, as I'm sure you know, because then, if the nervous system is so activated and somebody's in fight or flight or freeze, it's really difficult to be able to drop in and get the healing that can really happen in that space. So, I really use this concept of titration. So it's just a little bit and then you come out, and a little bit and come out. So I do that with a lot of my clients because it just can be so uncomfortable. And at the same time, I offer the reframe where these are all just, these are parts. And these parts are asking, of course, to be seen and heard. And if we stick with them long enough and we ask them questions like, well, first of all, I always like to kind of get a picture of like, what is really the feeling tone of this sensation? What's the color? What's the shape? What's the movement? Is there temperature? What's happening? And just being able to anchor on to a description can actually be really, really helpful. And then from there, asking questions to those parts, like, what is it? What's your purpose? There's some incredible, this is like teaching that wisdom that comes through the body.
Mm,
And they think it's their mind saying it, but of course it's not their mind, right? This is the body wisdom. And then it's like, then the question is, what do you need? And often that is like the breakthrough question, because when those uncomfortable parts can actually speak what they need, um, then other parts come in to provide that support, and things shift and change. So like everything shifts and changes, right? So whatever is feeling uncomfortable isn't necessarily going to stay like that. So that's kind of some of the approach that I take, is like small little bits of titration, but then also really giving the space for that conversation, for the deep inner wisdom of the body. The person's conscious mind won't have any idea of how to deal with it, but the body does.
mm. I love that. I can really feel that, you know, place where there is maybe some space for the conscious mind and the fears and the negative chatter, but then also that invitation to go so much deeper into the wisdom of the body, and really finding out things like you said, that subconsciously the subconscious mind knows, but the conscious mind has no idea how to get there. It feels very expansive, really, when you're talking about it. And I want to go back to the metabolism part, because of course we hear about metabolism, especially I guess I hear about it most when we're talking about weight loss, and people that say, oh, my metabolism is really slow or really fast or all of that. How does that come into the conversation, if at all?
From the physiological standpoint.
From how it connects to everything that you do.
Right, right. So, of course, our bodies are taking in energy, and in terms of food, and then that's being processed and creating, also vital life force energy that allows us to do things. And um, what I would say is that, we've reached a point in our modern living where um, we unfortunately have really done a number on our bodies in terms of their health and vitality, and our metabolism. Our metabolic health is certainly suffering. I think the statistics are, in the United States, which, I think we can extrapolate probably to the Western world, that only 8% of people are truly metabolically healthy. That's staggering to me. And this becomes really apparent for women, particularly over 40, as we move in that perimenopausal journey and into menopause, because so many things happen to our bodies in that really profound and beautiful change into a different season of life. But with the decline of hormones, we become more insulin resistant. Uh, the toxicity that we really accumulate through a lifetime of, unfortunately, living on a planet that is particularly toxic. We live in the most toxic time in history. That takes also a toll on our metabolism, because if the liver isn't functioning optimally, then yeah, that also has an impact on blood sugar regulation, et cetera, all of these different pieces. So I do really feel like we need to address the physical body at a biochemical level to support the functioning, the optimal functioning of our body, so that also the energetic systems can function really well. Um, when we're experiencing, inflammation, that can, in those moments we just talked about of pausing, can feel really uncomfortable because there is so much inflammation in the body. So I do really like to offer for my clients who are interested is like this dual approach of looking at the body through this biochemical metabolic lens of, how can we optimize the systems in your body? How can we provide more balance in your hormones, particularly at a time where there might be a lot of change and a lot of um, friction and waves and things like that? How can we support the natural detoxification of your body? How can we really optimize your metabolism in the way that we're familiar with it, so that you're feeling good in this vessel and you can be more open and receptive to the power um, of creative energy that lies within you? I really do feel, and it's been my own experience as well, having worked with energy and the feminine and all of these pieces for so many years, that as I started to go through my own perimenopausal and now menopausal journey, I did really realize that the physical piece in my own life, and then I see this, of course, with the women that I work with, they need to go hand in hand. We can't do one without the other. They are like two pieces that are really so interconnected and joined. So yeah, I really do feel like addressing some of those lifestyle pieces really makes a very, very big difference in a woman's wellness and vibrancy journey in her life.
So what would be some of these steps that people can take? I mean, I guess kind of what I have in my mind is this idea of blocked feminine energy, and so the question is how do we start to slowly unblock all of this
Mhm.
energy?
So, a few practical tools. So, one of the things that is really important is to start to stabilize blood sugar in the body. Because if we are constantly on a cycle of up, down, and these kind of highs and lows through crashes, that really does take its toll. It takes its toll on us physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So, one of the first things I invite women to do is to just narrow their eating window to 12 hours. So, 12 hours you're eating, 12 hours you're not eating. And that's pretty simple for most people to do. And then we tweak it from there and often go longer. But that's, the very first step is just to do that. So if that means that, you have your first bite of food at 7 in the morning, then you're finishing by 7 p.m. at night. Just that can make a huge difference in terms of starting to regulate blood sugar and make somebody what's known as more insulin sensitive. So the whole metabolic system in terms of insulin and blood sugar is managing better within the body. Um, in addition, getting rid of all the toxic things, right? And so for women particularly, it's like all of the creams, right? All of the, beauty products, cleaning products, all of those things, really doing an inventory. And there's some great apps like Think Dirty. I think there's another one that's just escaping me at the moment, but they're free and you can scan your products and you'll be amazed at how many toxins there are in your environment that you can reduce. It seems like a small thing, but it's actually huge, because if you imagine that your liver is actually trying to deal with all of those toxins every day, and that doesn't even count all the stuff coming from the outside. But if you can clean up your environment in your home, that can also make a really big difference. The other piece, which is so, so important, is really, especially around hormones, is really addressing what is called the hormonal hierarchy. So, at the base of our hormonal hierarchy, we have the sex hormones, so estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, as well as the thyroid hormones. And then everything that's above that, it all goes downstream. So, above that, then we have insulin. Above that, we have cortisol, which of course is the stress hormone. And then I'll tell you what happens at the very top, but I just want to just take a moment to explain. So, cortisol affects everything, right? And so, as women age and go through perimenopause, our capacity to deal with stress diminishes. We often think it's a like, I have a problem, something's wrong with me. Why can't, why is the smallest thing kind of setting me off? I just can't deal with it. This is a real physiological thing that's happening because as we don't have the buffer of estrogen in the same way that we used to, we really, really struggle with stress. So we have to be much more mindful about reducing stress in our lives. I will admit, be the first to admit, that is very hard to do. I continually struggle with reducing stress in my life. It's very, this is just, our modern lives are stressful, but we really need to start to make that a priority. So self-care, um, giving yourself more time, finding ways to create more spaciousness in your life. And one of the ways that we also do that is at the very top of that pyramid is oxytocin. So, oxytocin, we know as the love hormone, it is the bonding hormone, it's what makes us feel connected. It is the antidote to all of these challenges that run downstream. So, oxytocin reduces cortisol, it helps stabilize insulin, and it helps regulate your hormones. So, if we circle back to what are some of the practices that I give people regularly, the most important practice, I think, is pleasure. Pleasure is the practice. We are hardwired for pleasure, but women consistently choose stress over pleasure. I don't know why we do that. Well, I think there's an evolutionary reason for that. I think that, of course, when our lives were different than they are in our modern context, we needed to be very aware of choosing stress over pleasure. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have survived. But in our modern context, it doesn't work very well. So choosing pleasure throughout your day, because interestingly, oxytocin also only has a 2 to 3 minute half life, meaning it only lasts in your body for a couple of minutes. We need to consciously choose pleasure, good feeling experiences. So I'm not just talking about sexual pleasure, I'm talking about anything that feels good. We need to be super intentional to weave that through our day. That is one of the most powerful practices that we can do. It's like, how many oxytocin rich moments can you have in your day? And all of that. So that affects the energy systems of the body, and it also affects all the biochemical processes of the body as well. So it's all about pleasure and oxytocin.
So you already started to answer my question, but really, because I find myself say a lot actually, find the joy. So I guess the joy and pleasure, the same idea, but of course you have other ways of pleasuring and all of that you bring it as another possibility of how to achieve this joy or pleasure. But it's
Yeah,
that basically.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, so joy, I can't remember who coined this term, but slices of joy, which are just these moments of joy. And
Mm.
so, whether that's just standing under the warm shower and feeling that on your skin, or one of the things I love to do is just rub my index finger, thumb really sensually, and just helps me drop back into my body. So being very intentional to put those moments in. So absolutely, joy, pleasure can be so many different things. One of the ways I guide people to find pleasure is think about your five senses. What provides you joy, through taste, what provides you joy through smell, all of these different things. And can you let your day be woven with these moments of joy or pleasure? And if we come back to our night practice, perhaps when you're just checking with your body, can you go back and relive, like, what were my top five pleasure oxytocin moments today? And even in that, we begin to relive that and create that, biochemical cascade that happens within our bodies.
I think it's very, very well explained. And I really like this idea of what you're saying is that, yes, we are so naturally good, I guess, at finding stress and keeping the stress, but actually there is something that we can do to let it go, to start releasing it and all of that. Um, and I want to then connect that with the idea of sexual pleasures. And a lot of conversations that I have had with both men and women, really about women most of the time, of feeling really too stressed to allow the pleasure and sexual pleasure, but also the pleasure of letting go and being in the moment in that pause um, comes through. So I've had men that says my wife is not interested in intimacy, and I had women that says actually I'm not interested. It's all because it's all in my head. He wants to get closer, and I'm thinking about everything that he's done or hasn't done. Or I mean, of course, there's different type of coupling, but I'm just using the traditional men and women. But the idea that there's a disconnect here between all of this. How yes, where can we take this conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question and absolutely very, very common. And this again just highlights exactly how women typically choose stress over pleasure. And men don't do that in the same way, right? So for men, often, sexual intimacy is a way to release stress, and women they need to be, an environment needs to be created that they can let go of the stress in order to, of course, experience intimacy and pleasure. So, of course, in order to create that environment, it needs to start well before getting into the bedroom. Foreplay is the long game, definitely. So, a lot of care and attention just in terms of creating the environment that's going to allow a woman to relax. So, whether that's spending a little more time doing the tidying up or all of the little things that are going to help her drop in. But even aside from that, I would say that one of the challenges for women is that they don't actually even know what they like. And this is perhaps conditioned in many ways because, we're taught as young women about pleasuring men and not really giving a lot of thought or care and attention to what it is that turns us on. And so many women kind of go through life in their relationship actually going through motions, but maybe not even knowing exactly what they enjoy. And in my own experience, especially after some sexual trauma, um, not only did I not know what I would like, I actually couldn't even express what that was because it actually triggered me into, a fight or flight response, which is very, very common. And so, you might be asked what you like. So if a listener is hearing this and then the answer is like, I don't know, and the mind goes blank, I just want to really normalize that because it's very, very common. So, but the good news is, of course, that can all like the brain is so incredible and your nervous system is so incredible at healing, so that it that is not, doesn't have to be like that forever. So, um, what I often support couples to do is to really take a step back and start to discover a common language and way of being and a way of creating intimacy with one another that is based within the senses, outside of the bedroom. So, I mean, of course, you could do this practice here, but let's say you gather materials that relate to each of the senses. So maybe you have some feathers, maybe you have some delicious foods, maybe you have some incredible smelling essential oils, beautiful music, all of these things. And partners can offer to one another these different things. And then, of course, touch being incredibly important, but maybe touch would be the last one in terms of using your hands. Do you like this? Faster or slower? Would you like this firmer or softer? What feels good? And then starting to co create this understanding of what it is that really feels good without an expectation of sex at the end of that. And this starts to create a really powerful connection between the couple. And it also starts to help a woman understand what feels good and give her those moments of dropping in to a place in her nervous system where she can actually receive pleasure. Right. So that's one example.
And I guess it's also, I guess because women are more complex in that way of associating pleasure with the maybe elimination of stress. Yeah, things has to have to be just right before you can really let go. And I guess that there is also the question of trust. So it's right. It's about trusting your partner. It's also trusting that, yeah. So it's kind of trusting that you are entering this kind of exploration journey together, but it's sacred. It's actually, it's a very safe zone. And I think, from conversations I've had with people, it's really sometimes that is the biggest challenge, is really how do we let go of all of the day-to-day resentment, anger, stress, and all of that to allow ourselves to claim that place of, hey, now let's spend some time together and see where it goes.
Absolutely. I mean, trust is this is the foundation. A woman really struggles to open her body and allow herself to be receptive to a partner if she isn't feeling trust. So
Mm,
her body will just not be able to do that. So that is really so important. And this is why I say that, uh, your erotic life with someone is so much more than what happens for that short amount of time sexually, in the bedroom. It is really something that needs to be woven through the day, creating that trust, that safety. This also includes, really honest, heartfelt conversations about things, which so many couples go through their lives together and actually they talk a lot about kind of like the day-to-day busy work, etc. But are they having those really heartfelt conversations? Some of them are really difficult to have. Those are really, really important. And as you know, I would say that my observation is that, as women get older, they need more of that and they require more of that and they actually demand more of that, right? Because um, that they really need to feel seen and heard in new and deeper and more profound ways. And so investing that time in really cultivating the richness and depth of a relationship becomes more and more important. You know, the the time period with the greatest number of divorces, of course, is like 45 to 55, because so many women just don't feel seen and heard and don't also have, I really also want to share that most of us were not given the relationship manual when we got together with somebody, and the relationships that are modeled for us in our families, in our circles, through our parents, society, aren't usually great models, right? So we're kind of expected to just know how to do this and know how to do it really well, and we're supposed to be like great communicators and amazing lovers and be able to do all the things. And it's like, well, how are you supposed to do all of those things if nobody actually ever taught you? So, I think a little bit of compassion and grace and understanding, like, okay, actually, you know what? I don't really know how to do this well, but I could learn, right? I could learn. And I do really believe that for most people, if the intention, if there's really an intention of love and honoring and trust, couples can learn how to navigate their way into more intimacy and closeness.
yeah, no, absolutely. But it's definitely a journey. I think that's a, yeah, journey I think is a key word here, but with willingness and patience. Um,
Yes.
and so I wanna ask, how do we move from here to understanding about the importance of this female energy? What is female energy, and why is it so vital that we reconnect with it? I guess yes, it is a part in the bedroom, but it's also in our day to day, and also of course I imagine. Am I correct in saying that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, but you have that energy in both of you? Is that true, or am I mixing
Yes,
things
I
up?
mean that's certainly my experience and what I believe is that yes, regardless of your gender, we have those energies of the masculine and feminine within us. And so, the feminine energy is really the energy. It is the energy of creation. It is the generative energy. Of course, it could be used to create life, but it creates everything, right? It creates projects, ideas. It is sort of this wild, messy cauldron of generative power. And, um, of course, over many centuries, that the expression of that, especially in the West, has been very much damaged and lost through a couple of millennia of um, patriarchal, very male dominated energies. And I would say that even though that has really been the overarching paradigm of our history for the last 2,000 years, 2,000 more than 2,000 years actually. Um, um, Sorry, I want to correct that to say 5,000 years. Um, I would also say that male energy is also like the masculine energy has also been really, really distorted. So I think that we're actually at this really opportune time to bring in the healthy expression of divine masculine or healthy masculine energy as well as feminine energy. But I would say, particularly for women, feminine the access to feminine energy has very much become a lost art. And I'm very, heartened to see that there's so many people who are bringing this back into awareness and consciousness and practice. Um, because for women, we're very much trained from being at a very young age to being, what one of my teachers, Shakti Malan, calls being like a junior male, right? So, we operate in a very linear world. We're expected to achieve things, very hierarchical, and all of that, has its place, absolutely. But there's not a lot of place for that wild woman wisdom to come through. And so, how do we bring that back in? Well, again, it's coming back into being present with the body, starting to listen to the wisdom of the body, the messages of the body, spending time in nature. There are many different practices, particularly from the Taoist system, Qigong, that really pull in creative life force energy, this feminine energy, and begin to circulate it in the body. Practices like the microcosmic orbit, very, very powerful, of moving sexual energy through the body. So there are many ways, there are many gateways to come into that. But I think it's really, first of all, about a recognition that both of those energies are important to have within ourselves in a healthy and balanced and um, really awakened state. And so that takes a little bit of navigating because we don't live in a world that really honors and supports that. I feel like we live in a world where there's a lot of distortion of those energies. So we have to be very intentional about it.
So what would the balanced male and female energies look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I would say balance doesn't mean that they're always even and in equal expression. What it means is that whenever whatever is happening at a certain point in the day, you're able to actually move into the masculine energy is the protector energy. It's the energy that makes the container. It is very linear. It's focused. It's driven. It's able to get stuff done, and we need that. I mean, certainly in our structured lives, we need to have that energy, but we also need the feminine to be able to flow, to be able to be experimental, to be creative, and she needs actually the masculine to hold that container for her. So if we come back to this whole idea of trust, even within your own body, for the feminine energy to really be in full expression, she has to trust that the male energy is holding the container for her, that she can be wild, messy, free, and expressive, right? So we need to feel a sense of trust within ourselves that, um, yes, this feeling of the feminine energy, she's got something that is holding and protecting her, right? And so, some of these ancient practices we can use, connecting time with nature, talking with other like-minded people, being really conscious to be weaving some of the qualities that that you really feel resonant with in terms of those energies throughout your day, being intentional about it. These are all the ways that we begin to invite that in and honor and experience more of that balance within ourselves.
I'm just you know, letting all everything that you just said kind of, wash over me. And I'm thinking how how interesting, I hear so often about people that say, that how they report that other people seeing them as too much, or and actually how often is it that we are so concerned with how other people see us and what they allow us to be, that we really don't allow us to be ourselves. And I guess these are the energies that you're mentioning, because if I can't be who I am without worrying of being too much, or how people think about me or judge me, then I am not safe enough to create, to lean into who I am. And yeah, it's just kind of, it really, I don't know, kind of makes me feel a little bit sad that that there's this thing that can give us so much, and yet we are so busy in a much higher level of, or layer of, am I accepted, am I seen as good enough, am I all of these worries that are taking away from an experience that I really want for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a common thing that women say that they're too much, and that's such a suppression of that feminine energy, right? Because the energy is like that is the expression of creation, right? And so that becomes dampened when we're told that we're too much, and so we begin to stuff that back down. So yeah, it does. It is very sad. I agree.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was wondering, first of all, is there something that you feel in this conversation that we haven't mentioned that you would like to bring to the forefront?
Hmm. Ah, I guess I would say that if someone is listening and is perhaps curious but not actually even sure where to start, um, I just want to encourage everyone, men and women, to just spend more time outside connecting in nature. This is like nature is the most oxytocin rich environment I think that we have. And of course, if you can do that with someone that you care about, then that makes it extra special. But just being present in nature, this is such a beautiful antidote to our stress filled lives. And the energy of the masculine and feminine is everywhere in nature, right? And so even though we may not be able to, you know, consciously hook on to what that looks like, your body is feeling it. So you're getting that experience of the energy moving through you. And that in itself is like it's teaching your cells, it's teaching your being. So I know lives are busy, but if you can really make it a priority to carve out time, even if it's just, you're in an urban environment and you go to a park and maybe you just, touch the leaves on a tree, or you just slow down and really notice things around you, the effect can be profound. So I just
Mm.
want to encourage people to really lean into nature being the greatest teacher.
And that brings me back to, it reminds me of a conversation I was having yesterday with someone that said that um, she's not finding it so easy to get into meditation. And I said, you don't have to sit down and meditate. You can walk, you can do walking meditation, sleeping meditation. You can go into nature, and I think that's kind of what you're saying. You don't have to really do anything, just be there and use your senses and touch and kind of allow nature to do what it's doing so well. So that is another way of meditation in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So just make sure you turn off the phone, no earphones, no nothing. Like just um this can be hard for people, but just yeah, let go of the sensory input from, modern life, and let your sensory input open and expand to nature and wildness around you.
Mm. And so before we finish for today, do you have any a success story or an example story of someone you worked with that you feel is really can demonstrate all these things that we talked about today?
Oh goodness. Well, certainly. There is someone that I worked with who I would say, just like many women who come to me, were just so dysregulated in their bodies and their nervous system, and and at the same time just feeling a deeper, like, the remembrance of something more. And I think that we all feel that in some ways, like even when we're not feeling like our best selves and we're struggling, there's a remembrance that there is um, the potential or capacity to return back to ourselves, even if we don't know what the roadmap of that is. And so, yeah, with this particular person, having to go very slow, lots of titration, um, helping her just really clean up the systems in her body, particularly around some toxicity, and just coming into a place of true vibrancy and health in terms of lifestyle, all of these pieces together. I mean, her life is radically different now, right? She's able to really step into um, a way of being. She doesn't feel like she's too much, in the way that she was. She really feels connected to her emotions. A lot of what I hear from women is that they're too emotional, Well, being
Mm.
emotional is one of your superpowers, right? So this is something that she's been able to embrace. And just, I want people to be turned on by life, right? So we associate turn on with sexual turn on, but turn on is really about connecting to that vital life force energy within, like the sacred metabolism. And so this is what I see in this person is this capacity, and it's not perfect, and it's not in every moment because that's just not how things go.
Mm.
But life is so much more available to her, and she really does experience life from a place of feeling really lit up.
And I think I love this because it's really helping to remember that actually we're not here just to grind, right? It's not just about the stress and the pressure and the making do and making ends meet and being in that really high stress mindset, but actually to allow ourselves to recognize that actually when you switch off, when you allow yourself to go back into simplicity and into basics, actually that gives you so much more to then go back and be able to deal with life in a completely different way. So this kind of remembering that there is another way is, I think, is so important.
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. Carla, this conversation has been incredible. I really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing about all of these wonderful topics, different little strands of everything that you brought. All of your information is going to be in the show notes of everywhere that where people find this conversation. So people, of course, are welcome to get in touch and find out more about what you do and how you help people. For anyone listening or watching, please do share, like, comment on on this conversation, because this is how we make sure that we spread the word in this crazy world that we live in today. Carla, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I loved our conversation as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.